Yo, hello. We got another emblem in the form of Ike, and he brings another emblem effect, and surprisingly, it's not another version of slang, aka they didn't just reprint the same gimmick every single time. We got a brand new emblem effect this time, although I will say, unlike Marth's emblem, this one isn't easily as splashable, but it still has plenty of uses, and because of that, I still want to go over it regardless. You know the drill, bada bing, bada boom, let's just get right into it. Ike's emblem effect is basically just armored beacon and flow tethered to your emblem effect. If the foe is too ranged and the foe special or your own special is ready and triggers before, during, or this combat, it will reduce the foe's next attack by 40%, and this isn't pierceable, similar to the likes of armored beacon and armored flow. Even as a side comparison, it's pretty much the same exact text. The only difference is that you're just not getting a boost to your special damage. Even so, reducing any sort of damage by 40% and having it not be pierceable is still an incredibly useful effect, especially for the unit archetype this is clearly designed to be for, aka ranged specialist, or any sort of unit that is designed to take on ranged threats specifically. I find that this is still going to be an incredibly helpful effect if you find that the unit you're using falls into that criteria. And if you aren't sure what kind of units you really want to use this on, one of the easiest archetypes you could throw this onto is any sort of savior, usually in the form of far save, of course, but there is one exception I would like to make, and that's only in the form of using armored blaze and the emblem effect, and that's mostly just so you could get unpierceable DR on any special regardless of range. Is it optimal? Probably not, but it can still definitely be helpful at times. Otherwise, you could easily slap this on any sort of god armor such as Valentine's Myrrh, who is arguably one of the best, if not the best, far saves we have in the game currently. That, alongside any sort of hardy fighter Aegis build, just makes her even more obnoxious to deal with. And again, you can pretty much just apply this to any sort of far save who could run a similar set, even though they may not be as strong. Having a hardy fighter damage reduction from Aegis and then having an emblem effect that reduces it from special damage, especially based on special manipulation, is still going to be incredibly helpful for tanking no matter what. You could also give it to any sort of bow armor if you don't want to run armored beacon or armored flow, so that way you could also make your damage output significantly better. This would also be in tandem with Golden Yule Bow, of course, because you can instantly retaliate with Deadeyes, and because of additions such as Savvy Fighter and Canny Fighter. With the emblem effect in tow, even if it does get shredded, you're still reducing a fair amount of damage no matter what, which is why if you want to skew a bit more of your armors towards damage output, you could definitely do that. And for those who want to just double down on their defensive properties, you could also stack this with armored flow and armored beacon, and with the emblem effect in tow, you're essentially getting 64% damage reduction whenever a special procs, which is very, very strong, especially since it cannot be pierced whatsoever. You could also give this to any sort of unit with true damage reduction. I think this is just a very common combination at this point, usually as seen with, Brave Dimitri, who has true damage reduction in his weapon and damage reduction in his B slot. A lot of the ranged ones can also take advantage of this if they have true damage reduction built into it. Units such as New Year Asker, New Year Alphonse, Midori, Guinevere, and if you're feeling really spicy, you could also give it to Gatekeeper, even if his combat isn't good. He's essentially just going to be standing there even more menacingly, assuming he just doesn't instantly die anyway. But even that aside, giving it to any sort of unit with true damage reduction is always going to be helpful, especially if you find them in a Soren composition, but I'll get into that in a second. Asker and Alphonse are definitely a lot more min-max. They have guard, true damage reduction based on their defense, and can take advantage of tempo effects extremely well because they have guard built into their weapons. That, on top of the fact that they have access to the likes of Flare and Open the Future respectively, they should be able to shrug off a lot of damage and have a very moderate amount of sustain. Midori doesn't have as much true damage reduction, but she can still fulfill a similar niche, with the benefit of being able to run Deadeye so that you can at least get damage reduction shredding, although you could also just run tempo and do the same thing that Asker and Alphonse are doing. And then you also have legendary Guinevere, who kind of just came and went, but she also has true damage reduction built into her weapon, so with something like Null Sea Disrupt and Emblem Effect, she should be able to shrug off a lot of damage, period, and heal it back with relative consistency. But you could also run this on a Soren comp if you want to make them into far saves. Asker, Guinevere, and Alphonse are good slot-ins for this role because of the amount of bulk they get generally. Guinevere may be on the lower side when it comes to her defense, but she has a lot lot of speed to make up for it, meaning that she won't be taking as many attacks head on, which can be beneficial on its own. You could also run Ymir because she has passive miracle built into her C slot, and she gets a lot of daunt from her weapon. She also gets first hit damage reduction if the foe can make a follow-up attack, which is almost always going to happen regardless. So if the foe is able to get a special on their second hit, then you're getting a lot of damage reduction on both hits. And for units like Cronus, she can be ran as a Vantage far save with the added benefit of having some sort of damage reduction to fall back onto if she does need to eat a hit. I will say when it comes to far saves and Brave Soren archetypes, it is a lot more limited, but there definitely are options regardless. And of course, you can pretty much just slap this on any sort of miracle unit so that they can take advantage of that special way more consistently instead of having it proc on the first hit. Legendary Deirdre and Legendary Fa have PRF miracles, which you definitely don't want to get procced on the first hit. Fa will definitely have an easier time because of the addition of New Sunstone and a lot of other damage reduction properties she can take advantage of, on top of the fact that she is relatively min-max. Deirdre definitely has a much more skewed defensive stat line, but she does have the added benefit of dealing a lot more damage. So as long as she is able to get her special off or it's ready, which it almost always will be because her special is going to be at 1 cooldown, it'll definitely be a lot more consistent. She won't necessarily have to worry about her miracle going off on the first hit. But otherwise, you can pretty much just slap this on any sort of armor for miracle shenanigans. Anybody with acceleration or candy fighter or any sort of damage reduction property is always going to be nice. Arcane Caliburnus, for example, has breath built into it, so every second hit is always going to be a miracle proc. And for any sort of bow armor, you could use Golden Yule Bow and charge it up extremely fast. Assuming the foe doesn't have any sort of guard effects, you should be able to get miracle on your own first hit. Also, assuming you are able to counter back, which should be easy if the foe isn't Valentine's Leon. And lastly, I figured it'd just be funny to mention any sort of Fiorms because they have PRF specials that cater to ranged threats. A lot of them pretty much just have this, and I mean, outside of the ones that are ranged flyers, I guess, which happens to be 2 surprisingly, you can pretty much just slap this on every single one of them and it should be good to go. And depending on how Lagoo's friend ends up working, this may end up also being an incredibly good slot in for both Summer Fiorm and OG Fiorm. I think one other point of contention that will come up when it comes to the usage of this emblem effect is whether or not you should give it to units that run godlike reflexes sets. And in my opinion, I would personally skip out on that idea, mainly because I find that the damage reduction that you would get out of Emblem Ike's effect in exchange for what Marth provides to those sets isn't necessarily the best trade-off, especially since in Emblem Marth's case, you can always have a permanent godlike reflexes up. Meanwhile, with Emblem Ike, you're still getting unpierceable damage reduction, but I find that what you would get out of just having a permanent godlike reflexes up is generally going to be a lot better when it comes to overall tanking, especially in scenarios where you're not going to be able to tank and it could easily fall out of the godlike reflexes loop. That on top of the fact that the percent damage reduction is only going to make so much of a difference if you keep adding it up and up and up, especially if you are running weapons that grant damage reduction or B slots that grant damage reduction. But that's at least my take on it. But as far as the applications are concerned when it comes to Emblem Ike's effect, I think this is probably going to be about it. It's definitely not nearly as splashable as just giving anybody slaying, but I think there are applications regardless. And if you do have a unit in mind that you plan to give it to, let me know down below. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you later.